Welcome back to my channel, and for today I'm going to be taking a look at this pair of vintage McAllister shoes made in 1987. Now these are in a sort of tan suede, and these are in about as good of condition as you could ask for. They're completely unworn. They do kind of have a bit of a dusty smell to them, but really it's very hard to find something this old in this condition. Even though these are over 30 years old, they're really not that valuable in the eyes of most people. Now the actual color is called tan buck. But what I want to do for this video is to go into some of the smaller details that have been lost over the past several decades and show you and encourage you to try to seek out some of these older pairs of Allen Edmonds if you can find them. They can be really difficult to find, and it can be a really long search to find anything, but hopefully eventually you can find something in your size that's in this newer condition. So the purpose of this video is not to criticize all of the newer construction methods with Allen Edmonds. It's just to show how these vintage shoes might be something that you might want to put on your radar and try to seek out. And just as an FYI, you might hear some background noise such as birds and other noises. I like to film with the door open so I get more fresh air. And unfortunately, sometimes I just can't do anything about the background noise of where I live. So let's get started. Now, obviously, this is a very casual shoe, and it is kind of tricky to pair with some clothing. So there's only certain types of clothes that I can wear with it, but it should be a lot of fun to see how I can use these. Now, just looking at this shoe, the welt on it is very, very different than what you see in today's Allen Edmonds. There is wheeling or fudging all along the edge of the welt, and this is a flat welt, but somehow they were able to hide the stitching underneath the upper. Now, I don't know how they did this with the older shoes, but you can see as the sole goes back to where the arch area and heel is, you can see there that the stitching is visible, but you can see it completely disappears before we get to the widest part of the shoe. This single leather sole, while it may look similar to more modern Allen Edmonds soles, it is different. The first thing that I noticed is that it is a little heavier than the current single leather soles, and it's also more supportive. I recently wore these to work for the first time, and I was pleasantly surprised by not only how comfortable they were, but they were more supportive than current Allen Edmonds single leather soles. They were not stiff for being over 30 years old. One thing I would like to find out that I do not know the answer to is whether or not Allen Edmonds used to use more leather in their heel stacks. I suspect they may have used more real leather back in the 1980s because there's just a more supportive feel. But I cannot confirm this because unless I tear these apart, there's no way of knowing. And as difficult as it was to find these, there's no way I'm going to rip these apart to find out. Interestingly though, the heel, the rubber heel, is still the same, pretty much as it was 30 years ago as it is today. So that part really has not changed very much at all. Of course, the stitching was smaller, so per inch you had more stitching than you currently get. Now, this was actually a pair of factory seconds because it has the stamp on it. You can tell if you look closely, you can tell there are some imperfections with the stitching on the upper in certain places. That could be the reason why these were factory seconds, or it could also be the crooked welt stitching on some of the heel area. That could also be why they're factory seconds. But quite honestly, this could pass for first quality with current Allen Edmonds shoes. I will say that just looking at the details on the cuts of the upper, they are a little bit more small and more detailed than the current Allen Edmonds shoes. The laces were also different back then, although you can very easily find this kind of laces at most cobblers these days. Steve from Beato's Leatherworks sent me a pair of these laces in the past. One thing you will notice about these laces is that they just stay tied better throughout the day. The lining they used back then was this darker brown kind of lining. It's different than what they use now. It is a little bit softer than the current lining, but I don't think it's really anything to write home about. You can see the sizing and the information on when it was constructed is stamped on the side of the upper instead of on the tongue. That's another indication that you have an older pair of Allen Edmonds, is if the size and the numbers are listed on the side of the upper instead of under the tongue. I think it was around 2011 that they started putting the size on the tongue. The leather insole is just a full grain leather insole. There is no pour-on heel sock liner like a lot of manufacturers have. I don't think you really need it with Allen Edmonds because I find them still plenty comfortable even without the heel sock liner. But what's interesting is you can very clearly see the logo was different back then. You can see the vintage Allen Edmonds logo, the handcrafted world of Allen Edmonds, and then it very clearly says Made in USA, which of course they had to change later to handcrafted in USA because you can't say Made in USA unless it's entirely assembled in USA. And as we know, Allen Edmonds sometimes have had their uppers partially made in the Dominican Republic. Now, if we get closer inside to where the ball area is on the inside of the shoe, what's interesting is that you can see these little holes above the toe area where the upper is. Now, I believe they put those holes there so that the shoes would have better breathing. I'm not sure if that's why the holes are there, but that's what I believe they are for. But it's another one of those nice little details that they used to add to their shoes that was removed many decades ago. You might also notice on the insole that it has the word fine on it. What does that mean? Well, one of my friends who goes by the name Vincent, we were discussing this a while ago. He discovered that Allen Edmonds used to have their leather insoles produced from this factory out of Pennsylvania. I don't remember the name of the factory, but they closed sometime around the year 2006, I think. So Allen Edmonds used to get all of their full grain leather insoles from this factory in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure where they're getting their insoles from now, but these older ones were definitely a little bit different. One of the things you might notice with the older insoles is that they have a more white color to them rather than the brown that you currently see. They're a little bit more supportive, but they're also slightly more firm, not quite as forgiving. I wouldn't say there's a huge difference, but I do like the way the older ones feel better. And then you can see Allen Edmonds used to have this larger stitched logo on the side of the upper on one of the shoes. They were still making them that way up until about the year 2020, I believe. But the models in the 1980s, you'll notice, have an even larger version of this stitched logo. Now, does it really matter that this is gone in terms of function of the shoes? No, but it kind of makes me sad to see another little detail get taken off because of cost-cutting measures. Now, in terms of fit and sizing, what's amazing to me is that these are on the 65 last and they still fit pretty consistently with all my other 65 last shoes, even the ones that were made in 2022. So it appears that Allen Edmonds has been able to keep their sizing very consistent over many decades, which is awesome. And then if we look at the outsole, we can see there's a lot more detail on the leather outsole. The stitching is very pretty. In fact, it looks very similar to how Alden currently makes their leather soles. So yeah, I mean, this is a beautiful sole. Allen Edmonds really used to be much closer to Alden in terms of the quality that they put into every pair of shoes. But as I've explained in other videos, Allen Edmonds has really tried not to raise their prices very much, so they've had to cut some corners. Whereas Alden has not cut their corners as much. And that's why Alden shoes and boots continue to increase in price as our currency continues to lose value every year. What a lot of people may not know now is that Alden and Allen Edmonds were once the same price pretty much. If you go back to the early 2000s and browse on archive.org, you can see that the Shoe Mart was selling both brands, and both Allen Edmonds and Alden were similarly priced. That might surprise a lot of people today in 2024, But about 20 years ago, the two brands were a lot closer than what many people realize today. Now, in terms of the quality of the suede and the finishing, yes, it was better back in the 1980s on this pair. Not surprisingly, you'll just notice that even though this was a factory second, you can just see that the details and the quality of the suede is a little better than what you get with current Allen Edmonds. But of course, you have to remember that Allen Edmonds in 2024 is not the same as they were in 1987. They have expanded way larger since then. They're a much bigger company. They produce a lot more shoes. Back in the 1980s and 90s, it was easier for them to provide this much detail in a shoe. But with the current amount of shoes that they crank out now, it's just not possible. So my main argument with this video is just to show that the detailing, the quality control, the finishing, the quality of the leather, and the support, it was all better with these older Allen Edmonds. Those of you who have followed my channel for years, you can probably read between the lines on some of the things that I think about the current trend of Allen Edmonds. Like, for example, I'm not really a big fan of the dress sneaker trend. I completely understand why it exists. It's very important to helping Allen Edmonds stay afloat. It's just the way it is right now, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. But I generally like to talk about the good side of companies. I don't like to focus a lot on the bad side. The last part of this video is on the topic of Allen Edmonds customer service in 2024. I'm going to tell you a story of a recent experience I had. Back in January of 2024, I sold my pair of Higgins Mills in Chile. Now, I sold them because they were a half size larger than what I usually have. I was starting to slide a little bit in them, but I also wanted to see if I could pick up a pair that was in a lighter shade of Chile. I saw one of my friends has a pair of these boots, and he has them in a very light color of Chile. So I really tried hard to see if I could find a way to get a pair of lighter colored Higgins Mills. So I reached out to the shoe bank in January of 2024. They did not have any that were on the lighter side, but there was a store that reached out to me. I'm not going to name which city because I don't want to call out a specific city or any store, but this store reached out to me and they told me that they had this pair of lighter colored Chile Higgins Mills. So one of the associates sent me a photo to my email. So when I saw this photo, I was very interested, and I told the associate that if those boots were still available for the next sale, then I would buy them. So I waited about 3 or 4 months until the anniversary sale, which was in April. The store got in touch with me, so I asked them, is that pair still available? And the store responded, yes, we will send them to you. So I was very excited to know that these boots were still available because it had been several months. Fast forward to when I received them, I was very excited. So I tried them on. They fit great. In fact, they fit better than my previous pair. In other words, I just quickly looked at them. So I took a few steps in them around the home and a little bit outside our home. Now, this was in the evening, so I couldn't really see the boots very well because it was dark already. But the following morning, I realized that this pair was a lot darker than what it looked like in the photo I was sent. So once I saw that these looked darker than I remembered, I looked at the welt and I realized the welt was not the same welt that was on the pair in the photo. So in other words, the store employees sent me a different pair than what I was being told I was being sent. Now, I can hear some of you saying, why will you complain about this? This is a first world problem. Who cares, right? Well, you do have a point, but the whole point of this search was that I was trying to find a pair that was on the lighter side. I wasn't just trying to get any pair. This is a very nice pair of Chile Higgins Mills, and they fit me really well. Even though they are on the darker side, they're still a really nice pair of boots. They just weren't exactly what I wanted. What I believe happened is that they sold the pair that I was interested in long ago, and they did not want to lose the sale. So they lied to me and told me that they still had the same pair. That makes the most sense. I reached out to this store 2 times, And both times I tried to contact them, I did not get any response back. Now, it is not okay to lie to your customers. I don't care what business you're in, it's just not okay. Tell your customer that you do not have that pair anymore, and then tell them perhaps we can find something that's similar. But do not lie to them just so you can get their business. That's not okay. I totally get that many of you are going to say this is my fault because I wore them out on the pavement. Yes, I should have waited. But at the same time, I'm also assuming that the store associate is going to be honest with me and that they're not going to send me a different pair than the one they sent me photos of. Right? I think I have a complaint. And unfortunately, this is not the first time I've heard about something similar like this happening to other people. It's the first time it happened to me, but I know of another person who purchased a pair of Allen Edmonds, and this associate sent them a pair from the Tennessee warehouse instead of sending the pair from the actual store. Pretty much the same thing that happened to me. That's not good. But also, another friend of mine purchased a pair of trunk show boots from one of the recent trunk shows. This was in Shell Cordovan, so it was very expensive, over $700 for this friend. And when they arrived, he noticed that they were constructed a half size smaller than what they should have been. This customer has purchased well over 30 or 40 pairs of shoes, maybe even more. But you can easily tell, once you've bought that many pairs of shoes, you can easily tell if something's constructed incorrectly. So he contacted Allen Edmonds customer service and told them the problem about the shoes being too small and not being constructed correctly. But instead of allowing him to return them so they could be sold to another customer, which they would be, someone else would buy them, they just told him, tough, we're not going to do anything about it. That is not how you treat your customers, especially the ones that have bought lots and lots of pairs over the years. But one of the things that was lost when Allen Edmonds closed down most of their outlet stores in 2022, they lost a lot of really good employees that provided excellent customer service for years. Allen Edmonds shut down most of the outlets because they wanted to not have to sell so many factory seconds. They wanted to focus more on the first. And I can understand that. I understand they don't make as much money on factory seconds as they do on first quality. But when they closed down those outlets, they lost a lot of great customer service that they used to have. And this sort of trend with this customer service would have never happened at those outlets that I dealt with years ago. Has this experience soured me to the point that I'm not going to buy any more Allen Edmonds shoes? No, I'm still very interested in what they're doing. Heck, they're probably still my favorite shoe company. I mean, if you look at my past video history of how many videos I've made, most of them are about Allen Edmonds products. I'm still a huge fan of the brand of shoes and also their last. And I don't like to make this kind of content on my channel. I generally like to keep things more about the good things about companies. So hopefully Allen Edmonds will see this issue and find a way to fix this problem with the customer service. I hope you got something useful out of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video.